Day two, three, four-ish for Boeing. It's been almost like a week running of bad news flow, but the stock's volatility has calmed a bit. Let's talk about it with Tony Bancroft. He's a portfolio manager at the Gabelli Commercial Aerospace and Defense ETF, ticker GCAD. Of course, not the first time you're on the Schwab Network. Happy New Year. Welcome back, Tony. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Oliver. Happy New Year to you.
All right, how are you thinking about Boeing's situation? Firstly, as an investor, but I'd also like to kind of pepper in your own take as far as leadership goes, your history with the military, and just the checks and balances that seem to be out of whack. Walk me through what you're thinking.
Sure. I think initially you just got to look at it financially, the impact, how it's going to play out for the stock. The long term, we're long-term owners of Boeing. I think in the near term, the impact that this potentially could have, again, this is all still too early to speculate. But in the near term, the financial impact we find out as far as concessions, the airline potential, and inspection costs is relatively immaterial, assuming this gets wrapped up in a reasonable amount of time. Long term, the secular story for commercial aviation hasn't changed. The amount of aircraft they're going to need to be produced to keep up with global demand over the next 20 years is intact. The amount of air travel that has grown and is continuing to growing is above global GDP. So we see all of those factors being, secular structural tailwinds for Boeing and the whole commercial aviation industry.
So the mathematical case is basically, it's kind of bulletproof in a way, just because there's really two major companies doing this. And there's a clear, healthy travel industry. There's not enough planes. We saw that with kind of supply constraints. But what about the business? How do they keep the brand intact?
Yeah, I think the commercial aviation industry is sort of is a victim of its own success, and it's gotten so safe to travel commercially, particularly in the U.S. under FAA guidelines. It's any issue or any incident that comes up gets highlighted, and it looks like it's I think overall versus compared to how safe it is on a relative basis of travel, I think it's a little inordinate on how much people focus on it. So I think in the long run, I think aviation is going to be just fine. These situations do happen. 2.5, 3 million people per day in the U.S. alone travel through on airlines. So it's a very dynamic. There's a lot of moving parts. It's hard to do. And commercial air travel, all things being equal, does a very good job of getting passengers safely to their destinations.
I know that we're still getting the details, but I'm curious what your experience as a pilot, as a fighter pilot. I don't know how much that translates over into the commercial aircraft. I imagine a lot more than whatever knowledge most people have. But it seemed like at first they had this announcement where they said that they needed the airlines and the FAA to check, make sure there were bolts on a rudder, which kind of seems like a big deal to me because the rudder was kind of the issue for the MAX to begin with. And then the door blows off. But then there was a report that, okay, well, there are changes that one can compartmentalize within this actual plane. If you're not using all the space, you can move doors around. And then it was like, well, there was a light that went off 3 times. That to me would seem like it's an airline problem from Alaska's side. So can you, I don't know, you don't want to jump the gun too much, but what's your gut tell you?
Yeah, everything you're saying with it's all in line and logical. I would say though, again, commercial aviation and the engineering that goes on and the variability of all these different jets and production lines is complex, and you're going to have things will happen. The curve of safety is asymptotic. There's only so far you can get it down to, and overall, all things being equal, it's extremely safe by measured against any other form of travel. And I agree, it's too early to tell. Like you said, there are some questions there about, what you're talking about with the cabin pressure light. And I think we're going to find all of this out. The FAA is going to mandate that a comprehensive inspection is done before anything goes back in the air. And I think it's all going to work out in the long run. And the NTSB will do a thorough inspection as well, and we'll have the full incident report, and get and learn from it, and even get safer in the long run.
What about the possibility of government inspection, or like I don't know, some kind of legislative effort, because there's already kind of an image associated with them under the Muhlenberg era of profit first, and that there's folks that are going to argue, they're going to say, okay, this keeps happening because they're too worried about profitability. Now, I know they're less profitable than they were at their heyday, but is there any truth behind that? And does that open up a risk of further investigation?
I would say, just like in my previous fleet days, safety is paramount. There's safety, and then everything else is far behind it. And I think the same translates and applies to the commercial aviation industry. If you don't have safety, and people don't feel comfortable flying planes, there's going to be no economics behind it. And I think, Boeing, I visited Boeing's plants. I visited the Renton plant, and there's no question Boeing and all of the commercial operators, the industry itself is fully focused on safety being number one, because they know if it goes the other way, the business is going to go away. So I think overall that's the reality of it.
Okay. So sticking with it right now, is there anything that would make you rethink the position in Boeing? Is there any kind of smoking gun you're worried about?
I'm not. I think, in the near term, there's going to be news that will probably come out that, may move the position around, may move the stock around. But I think over the long term, all the secular and structural themes that why we invest in the industry, and in Boeing in particular, I think those remain intact, and I remain a long-term holder of Boeing.
All right. We appreciate the insight. Thanks a lot, Tony.
Thanks.
I know you got a lot of other stocks and have fun. We'll talk about them next time. Obviously, Boeing, big highlight right now. Tony Bancroft, Gabelli Commercial Aerospace and Defense ETF.